Hi fellow artists, my name is Lauren. I am the artist behind Potato Art Studios, and in this video I'll be demonstrating how I colored these two jellyfish with pastels and pastel pencils. So if you're interested in seeing my process and how I completed this drawing, just keep on watching. So to start off with a disclaimer, I am not a professional with pastels by any means. I recently picked pastels back up again since I first purchased them over a year ago, and this is the second full pastel drawing that I've completed so far. So in this video, I'm just showing you how I approached drawing these two jellyfish with pastels and how I thought about coloring them. And so hopefully, if you're also new to pastels like me, you can take some of the pieces of advice that I've learned during this drawing and maybe incorporate them into your own work. I used a couple of different types of pastels. The background is mainly a soft pastel, and soft pastels basically look like chalk, but they are very highly pigmented. And in the background stage, I just scribble in any direction, it doesn't really matter. And to blend out the blue, I used a tool called a soft tool. It's spelled S-O-F-F-T, and I'll have a link to it down below. But basically, it's like a palette knife shaped blue handle, and you slip over a sponge cover on the tip. And so you're blending the pastel with just the sponge. And these tools come in several different sizes and shapes, but I used the number 1 soft tool, which has a more round edge. And the paper that I'm using is called Pastel Matte, and it's made by a company named Clairefontaine, and I'll leave a link to this paper also in the description box down below. And this paper surface is very unique. It's very different from any other type of pastel paper or even sanded paper that I've used in the past. The surface of this pastel mat, it basically feels like velvet fibers that have been embedded onto the paper's surface. So it has a very soft texture. And my theory is that these fibers that are on the surface of the paper, they trap the pigment from the pastels, so you get that vibrancy from that you see on the pastel sticks. You get that sense of vibrancy on your paper. So your pastels show very true to color. So even though my base color of my paper is a very dark, cool gray, I can layer that bright blue water on top of it very easily, and you can see that basically the pastel completely covers the base color of my paper. And as we're getting into the orange jellyfish, the pastel paper doesn't tend to compete with the color of the oranges and yellows I'm putting onto it. The pastels layer very well and very opaquely over the paper. So in my drawing, I have it set up so that my drawing is on the right and I have a scratch paper on the left. And with that scratch paper is there because I am not familiar with pastels and color blending, so I want to make sure that I do all of my experiments on the side instead of on my actual piece of paper. Pastels are a lot more difficult to erase than normal colored pencil, so it's better to make your mistakes on the side on a separate piece of paper where it doesn't really matter. And once you're confident in the color that you want to use on your final drawing, you can go in with confidence that you're applying the correct color in the correct place. So having a scratch piece of paper is a good habit to get into even if you're not doing pastels. It's a habit I've used for a long time for my colored pencil drawings because your paper color can definitely affect how your pastels or color pencils layer. So it's a good thing to have. So if you're interested in doing sea life or any kinds of sea creatures, I think jellyfish are a very good subject to start off with. And I'm saying that because jellyfish don't really have prominent features. They don't really have a face, like how people have eyes and noses and mouths. If you draw a person's eye an inch off from where it's supposed to be, everyone can tell your person looks a little bit strange. But if you do that with a jellyfish tentacle, if you draw a tentacle 1 inch off from where it's supposed to be, people still understand that you're trying to draw a jellyfish, as long as you have that oval kind of dome bowl shape for the body and some tentacles coming out from it. Everyone understands that that shape is a jellyfish. So that allows you to be a lot more creative and actually a lot more loose while you're drawing, because you don't have to worry about something looking exactly like your reference picture. So whether you make modifications that are intentional or unintentional, your final drawing will still look like a jellyfish even if you make some modifications. So in the early stages of the jellyfish, I was going directly in with the thicker pastel sticks, and I was going from general to specific with details. And the pastel sticks are basically the size of regular pieces of chalk, so you can't get too much detail with them. But with the pastel sticks, I'm trying to get the colors as close as possible, so I have to do a lot of blending and layering with the pastel sticks first, and after I get that layer down, I can then go in with the pastel pencils, which can be sharpened to a very fine point and let me get a little bit more detail. So when I'm doing, at the time that I'm working on this jellyfish, I only have a few sets of pastels. I have one seascape set and two portrait sets. So I don't have many pastels that I'm working with, so I'm using a lot of layering and blending to try and get the colors that I want. Blending and layering colors is really important, especially if you're first starting out and you don't have a huge range of colors to pick from. You kind of just have to work with what you have and try and achieve the colors that you want to get. So while I was coloring the jellyfish, I was very worried about the colors mudding up, and that's because the boundary of the jellyfish and the water was an area I wasn't sure how I was gonna work out, because orange and blue are complementary colors. If you mix them together, they usually end up neutralizing each other and forming a kind of muddy gray. So while I was doing the jellyfish, I tried to leave a kind of a margin of space around the outline of the jellyfish, and then as I was coloring more and more area, I expanded the border of the jellyfish and the water slowly until they basically almost met. And where I wanted the edge to be very sharp, I went in with either a sponge or a cotton swab to make sure that the colors actually didn't muddy each other. So I had to approach it from two different fronts until they kind of formed a natural line. And I think that worked out pretty well. I think the colors at the border of the jellyfish's bodies were very sharp, and so I didn't have that muddiness that I was worried about. And so one of my main goals in this project was to work on that transparency and translucency of the jellyfish. And getting something to look transparent is very hard, because that means that I have to introduce the blue back into the jellyfish's body, so it looks like the water, you can see some of the water through the jellyfish's body. But in order to work around that, I tried to minimize the amount I would blend the blue into the orange, And so I tried to be very selective in the areas I touched with the blue pastel, and then try to refrain from blending those areas out too much and losing that bright blue. So as we're working on the tentacles, I found that you can be very relaxed with the tentacles. If you take a look at the jellyfish's arms, they kind of look like flowing fabric, and so in order to get that effect, I tried to get the base color of the tentacles as close as possible, and then I would go in with the pastel pencils, which have a much finer point, and draw basically the edges that would catch the light a little bit more, which created those highlights that you see. And as we're getting close to finishing up the jellyfish, I found out that I actually like the texture of the pastel sticks compared to the pastel pencils. Even though I started off with the pastel sticks, then went on to the pastel pencils, I actually finished off the drawing with adding more of the pastel sticks at the very end. I ended up enjoying that rougher texture for some reason. So I'll definitely be doing more pastel drawings in the future. I think pastels are a very, very different medium than colored pencil. And the way that you approach pastel drawings, you have to be a lot more methodical in how you approach layering and coloring. And pastels are a very fun medium to get into, but very, very difficult media to master. If you don't follow me on social media, I'll leave a link to my Instagram down below and also have it pop up here on the screen. On Instagram, I have a weekly poll where I ask what subject you would like to see me draw next. And actually, these jellyfish were selected in last week's poll, so that's why I ended up filming a jellyfish drawing time-lapse. If you have any questions or comments about this video, please leave them down below. I'm always happy to hear from you, and I always do my best to get back to you if you leave a comment. If you have any recommendations for resources from pastel artists that you admire, please leave a link to them down below. I would love to check them out. I am also working on a video for pastel tips based on my experience from working with this jellyfish drawing, so make sure that you're subscribed if you'd like to see more videos from me, and hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified when that video goes up. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.